probably the most important thing is to hear from you people, but I think I'd just like to add a few words. Very pleased that Andrew Marr's name came up, although I thought there were, it was you, Mark, wrote down a pair of remarks about Hello magazine. I was seeing the dentist and find it really amusing and quite straight up, actually, which Marr isn't. I mean, Marr, and I don't want to personalise this too much, but Marr is everywhere, so why not? He embodies, I think, everything that Mark and Greg have talked about. I used a clip of him standing outside number 10 Downing Street on the night, March the 26th, I think it was, 2003, when the attack on Iraq had happened, and it was a celebration of Blair. I mean, what happens at moments like that is that those euphemisms and that rather thin veneer all fall away. And you know, some said that he would be criticised and so on. He's been vindicated and proved that this is everything he's done. At least some said there would be a bloodbath. You know, incredible. I think the John Hopkins survey by 2006 had 750,000 people killed. There's an NGO in the US that just published a report, quite an interesting one, on the number of widows created, if you like, during the years of the occupation. 1.5 million widows. Those statistics, of course, are terrible, and we don't have to fall into the trap of simply producing apocalyptic statistics, though I think they're important. I think they're important to understand the sheer scale of what Britain, what the United States, what those who act in our name have done and how they are presented. Marr's speech, and he was BBC political correspondent there, outside number 10, was a speech of celebration. And it's not at all surprising that one of the many interesting, more than interesting, illuminating WikiLeaks diplomatic cables that are not published in Britain, although you can access them, but they don't appear in the press, is one that has Hillary Clinton advising, as one that has the embassy, the US embassy in London, advising Hillary Clinton to tune in to Andrew Marr. And what they're saying, in effect, this is the most reliable journalist to watch. This is the one. I mean, I would have thought probably Marr would take that as a compliment. But it's a shaming thing for the most rapacious power in the world to recommend you as a source of information. No, none of this is recent. You know, the last British war that was reported without censorship was the Crimea. The great war correspondent William Howard Russell and his equally great editor John Delane of the Times, it was Russell, of course, who exposed the catastrophe of the Light Brigade, the charge of the Light Brigade. I mean, both of them, Queen Victoria was outraged. The government wanted to try both of them for treason. And really after that, the likes of Russell, apart from Mavericks, and there have been a number of Mavericks, but as an institution, that was ended then. And you arrive at the First World War, which really invented embedding. All the correspondents were deeply embedded. Some tried to buck the system, as it always happens, but the overall impression created by correspondents during that slaughter was that it was all worthwhile. They all wrote their memoirs. Most of them were knighted or given imperial gongs after it, and then wrote their memoirs in which they confessed that it hadn't been their job to describe the huge suffering of men in the trenches. I mean, one of the interesting, I think, graphics I showed in my film that Emily mentioned was how the killing of civilians has really taken over in modern wars. First World War, I think the killing of civilians was a minority, quite a small minority. It was armies just blasting away at each other. By the time you've got to Second World War, the killing of civilians is approaching 50%. By the time you get to the Vietnam War, the killing of civilians is the very considerable majority, and by the time you get to Iraq in 2003, it is the overwhelming majority, up to 80–90%. That is the story of modern wars, and that is the story that is almost never reported. I agree with certainly with Greg's views about the BBC. I've never thought that The Sun was particularly important in understanding how wars are reported. I think Fox in the United States is, because it's television and it goes everywhere. But the most important, above all, is the organisation that has this extraordinary credibility. And I often slumped in front of the television, trying not to watch news or current affairs. I see why. The production values are so good. You know, I'm envious when I see some of the values of how the natural history series are produced, the drama, the very interesting and quirky series that have nothing to do with news, of course. You know, it is brilliant. News and current affairs stands out as the disinformation that my friends have described. Unwatchable for me, unless I'm going to sit there night after night, deconstruct it and monitor it, as sometimes I do. And it's when you hear it's so bad in the United States that the BBC is regarded as, over there, BBC America is regarded as the place to go to find out what's really happening. Thanks to Greg and the work of his unit, we've been able now to start to deconstruct this enormously powerful propaganda system. We've started to understand that, for instance, in the run-up to the Iraq War, as the University of Wales at Cardiff and Media Tenor survey showed, the overwhelming coverage of the BBC was the government's view on the war. Forget the million or so people in the streets of London. Forget the evidence that was already coming out about weapons of mass destruction and that propaganda. That was the coverage, and it was incredibly important. And when a couple of people at the Trafalgar Square rally, which I attended today, spoke at, talked about journalists having blood on their hands. That sounds pretty tough, but it's correct. Because while journalists do this, while they beat the drums of war, while they echo and amplify the lies, the disinformation, the distortions of government, instead of investigating them, instead of explaining them, while they do that, then, as the famous American anchor Dan Rather said in an interview with me, the Iraq War might not have happened